I just learned that there's no limit for women. Hello, my name is Tatu Gatere, and I am the founder and CEO of Buildher. Welcome to the Power Panel Podcast Echoes.
I'm interested in the connection between training, competence, and hustling.
If I was a hustler, I would never have accomplished what we're doing with Buildher. And in construction, what we find is about 80% of the construction workers don't attend any formal training. They learn on site. It's very hard to innovate without deep expertise.
So does that mean that leadership is passion and trial combined?
For me, pain and passion go hand in hand. And when you try to avoid the pain part of passion, then you don't get as far as you could.
Welcome to the Power Panel Podcast Echoes, a segment of our show dedicated to exciting intergenerational conversations with some of Africa's young, dynamic women leaders. I am your host, Ambassador Rachel Omamo, a senior counsel, diplomat, and former cabinet minister in Kenya. Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Tatu Gatere. In part 1, Tatu narrated her early years and how she shaped her values and her vision for architecture as an instrument for social change and her desire to emancipate disadvantaged women in the construction industry. We continue her journey into social entrepreneurship. You've succeeded in establishing this NGO called Buildher that is focused quite substantially on women and training and empowerment. So tell us how that idea, how was it incubated? How did it come to fruition?
Yeah, so...
And what made you feel that you needed to transition away from being this country director into somebody who was now in control of your space and driving the program yourself?
Yes, so that I'll first go back to that project in Kibera that was so impactful. We ended up training 30 youth to design and build the doors, the desks, the furniture, the windows for this beautiful school in Lindi in Kibera. And watching that project and watching how the youth from that program not only had technical skill and mastery, but they were able to change their economic, conditions. They moved homes. They now could get work and pay for rent and pay for education. That was, I think, for me, the incubator to understand that skills training had this ideology. It was a follow-through of the ideology of teaching a man to fish rather than giving him the fish. So that really impacted me. And after 3 years working in Kibera, I sort of had a crisis. I felt that I had become a community developer and I no longer understood where my design, background would fit in, because I was designing and building, but as a country director, you just do so much more management and leadership and strategy. And so I actually thought of resigning to go back and build my private architecture practice. And in that process, my co-founder for Buildher reached out to me because he had visited me while I was launching this other training in Kibera. And he had watched the whole journey online. And he reached out and, requested a sit down and said, basically, he was an architect and he was running design-build projects, hiring and training women on construction sites. And they had managed to train over 500 women, but none of these women stayed in construction. They would just work on the project. When the project completed, they would move on. And his frustration and his pain point was, it was so hard to do this work, but there was no impact, long-term impact. So he wanted us to discuss how we could do this together. What could we launch? And basically, I had spent 2 years talking to women about why they wouldn't come to my program. And so I had this whole library of information on what women need to attend a construction program. So the first thing I said is, could you share your strategic direction, your strategic plan? And then second, would you be willing to turn it on its head, to shift everything? Because what I've learned is probably going to be counter to what you want to do. And so we went through the strategic plan, and it was as I had anticipated. What I had learned was you had to center community in any initiative to do with community. And so I took all the feedback from the women and I made it the center. And that was the incubation of Buildher, was community first, community center, and then woman centered. Everything we did, we had to be in continuous conversation with women about whether this was working and what was coming up for them. What battles were they fighting at home or in the community that we could help them as they were shifting their lives and gaining more agency. And that's how we developed it.
What do you think training is? We talk about capacity building, we talk about training. These are just, vocabulary that, we just are forever yapping on about in the development center and the policy space,
Yeah.
But in real terms, having watched women go through the programs at Buildher, what would you define training as? When you say this person has been trained, what are you saying?
Now we are 7 years in. We've trained over 700 women. So my response now is very different than if you had asked me a year ago. Trained now is a woman being able to identify her own individual expertise, her as a person, out of her own experiences. What have those experiences taught her? So when you see her be able to rely on her experiences to help her form and chart the way forward, that I would consider training. Additionally, it's when participants or women can see beyond themselves. So first was you are the center and you are the resource. You are ultimately the biggest resource for what you want to accomplish. And then second is, can you rise above yourself? Can you rise above the context and the background that you've come from and see a future where you are more positive, healthier, happier than where you are now? And can you use that as a point that you work towards every day, even when it's ridiculous, it's impossible to consider this could happen? When you see her able to translate what you're teaching her, but from the perspective of, I'm merging this with who I am. I have strength as well, and I'm adding. And then I can envision a different, personality, a different life where I'm better. And I can use this training and my background to get there. Then she's trained. And it's long-winded, but
Okay.
that's what I would say.
Yeah. Well, it just tells me that training is a complex thing. It's not something that's commonplace and just a straightforward 3-word discipline. As we continue to discuss this idea of training, I'm interested in the connection between training, competence, and hustling. I mean, if you go to countries like Germany, for example, tradespeople are respected because of their expertise. They don't see themselves as hustlers. Even a bricklayer doesn't see themselves as a hustler. Yet, within our context, there's this idea that it's enough to hustle. And you don't have to have the deep knowledge. Do you think that those two parallels are things that create this kind of dissonance in the construction sector that then precipitates this lack of drive to be a specialist, whether you're a bricklayer, whether you're a joiner, whether, I'm beginning to feel that this idea of competence, of excellence, isn't a culture that we're building in our society, and especially in the construction industry, where you walk into a house and the steps are all topsy turvy, the windows won't open. That kind of frustration that you confront. And is it because of the hustler culture, or is it because there aren't opportunities that you are presenting for people to sharpen skills? What is it?
Wow, this is such a big pain point for me. So I would say, first and foremost, if I was a hustler, I would never have accomplished what we're doing with Buildher, because it takes deep expertise, deep listening, deep response, not reaction, response to what you're learning. And then I would add that I think the hustler culture we see across Kenya is actually in many ways disempowering the community and the social structure, the social fabric of who we are as a people. Hustling in itself is not wrong, it's not bad. But we also need deep reverence, deep respect for the areas that we're trying to, build, or the areas we're trying to collaborate or create. I think that understanding where you come from, so the context, where is this place? I'm trying to join a place. What is it like there? Who are they? Who occupies there? What's the history of there? It takes time to be able to understand that. What precedes me? How do I belong in this conversation or in this discourse or in this topic? And in construction, what we find is about 80% of the construction workers don't attend any formal training. They learn on site. And on site, it's all about deliverables, deadlines, and costs. So you're not learning this stone material. What are the critical components and principal properties of this stone, or this timber, or concrete, or paint? What are the chemical properties that make it react with another material? What is a structure that makes it what it is? There's none of that. All there is you take this thing and you put it here. But that thing has a reaction with something else. And I would say, if you look at infrastructure, the way we do roads, the way we do bridges, the way we do buildings, the way we construct our city is enough of a frustration. We've essentially redrawn the colonial lines through the way we've developed our city, because there was no interrogation of why this was done the way it was and how it would be different. And how do we, as a proud, independent, liberated people, how do we develop our country? None of that. So when we lean on this temporary, what can I get from this place attitude, which I think is what a hustler is. I'm coming, I don't have a lot of time, I have to make it work. You disadvantage the potential of what that could be. Even before, let's go to expertise. And then expertise allows you to ground what you're doing in what is the right way of doing it, and then innovate. It's very hard to innovate without deep expertise. And so if you look at the way we build our buildings, if you look at the lack of light, the limited areas for children to play, the unsafe buildings, the way buildings collapse across the country, it's because that deep expertise is lacking in the construction workers, in the people who design the buildings, in the county system of how we approve them.
What approach have you taken to the question of expertise at Buildher?
So at Buildher, the first 5 years, we considered it empowerment. We were shifting women's understanding of their place in construction, reminding women that their grandmothers were the first builders. So women have always had a place. It's us who forgot about it. And then supporting women to believe they had the capacity and capability to belong in construction. But after 5 years, when we could see the progress of women in the industry, women going into business, starting their own enterprises, contracting for jobs, doubling their income, tripling their income, we made a conscious shift to go from empowerment to expertise. And our focus now for the last 2 years, year 6 and 7, has been expertise is the route to empowerment. And so that's our focus now, is to really teach women that the industry doesn't need more generalists. There's already too many generalists in construction. What the future of the sector, the future of money, the future of you succeeding and you growing your career is expertise.
All right. So, do you present these women with certificates when they finish different stages of their training, so that they have something that proves that they are climbing up the hierarchy of expertise?
Yes, so we issue women with Buildher certificates, but we're also really proud to be a certified NITA testing center. So the National Industrial Training Authority, we are the only testing center in Kenya focused on women. So we allow men and women to take tests, but we are prioritizing supporting women to take NITA testing and NITA certification. So yes, we definitely provide them with certificates, and not just ours, but nationally.
Okay. Now, you seem to be breaking a lot of new ground in with Build Her. How does it feel to be a person of influence?
I think it is intimidating most of the time. That's the truth about it. But it's also really energizing and inspiring on a day to day. So we've innovated a few things at Buildher. We launched the Buildher shop, where we have a women run furniture company making sustainable furniture. We are the only workshop in Kenya that is led and operated by women. So to see that on a daily is really inspiring. We also launched the Fundi Desk, which is a service where clients, contractors, employers, property developers, homeowners, tenants can call us to access skilled labor. So if you're looking for a Fundi to install or repair, you can call us. And through that, we connect women directly to job contracts. So we've seen women, 5 times their income, making really good money because they are serving a market directly. So those aspects are very inspiring on a day to day. But the truth is, when you go home and you're trying to build something that doesn't exist, or you have no proof yet, because the training has proof now, but all these ventures don't, you really have to be courageous and talk yourself through those difficult moments.
As we take this short power break, we ask that you subscribe to the Power Panel podcast. Let's work together to expand the Power Panel community. Visit our website, birdsongafrica.com, and follow us on social media to plug into the Power Panel network. Email your thoughts to hello@birdsongafrica.com. This is the Power Panel podcast. Echoes. Well, I want to read back to you something that you said.
Okay.
And you said, I didn't set out to lead. I set out to build. But if we want to build anything that truly lasts, especially for women, then women must lead. Not just be part of the process, not just to follow the plan, but to shape it, drive it, own it. Because when women lead, we don't just build differently, we build what has been missing. I love that. What has been missing? Tell me, what have you built that has been missing that you can articulate in tangible terms?
Yes. I think a place that celebrates women and then uses that energy, the vibrancy that women bring to create a different, more inclusive future. Because the funny thing about Buildher is, yes, we set out to help women, but when we go back to the women and ask, what have you accomplished? It's all about the family. It's all about the things they're doing with their partners. It's all about how the family is progressing and their parents. And I think, to me, that inclusivity is what women's leadership and women at the forefront of change can bring. And so I'm really proud of that it starts with women, but it ends with the community.
I also wanted to ask you, in terms of missing links within the built environment and those who work within it, about the safety of women. the occupational standards, those things, that the regulations that need to be put into place to ensure that women work in places of safety, physical and mental safety. How have you been a pathfinder for that?
Yes. So about 2 years ago, in 2022, we really got tired of this conversation our women artisans were having about the lack of toilets on site. And something that basic, that is a law everywhere else in Kenya, is something we had to fight for. And this year, watching the new building code make that a requirement for all construction sites was a win, but it was also, bittersweet, like we need to do more. Safety on so many levels affects women in construction, from the fact that not only toilets, which now are being implemented, when a woman approaches a site to ask for work and she has to go to the gate to speak to the watchman to call the supervisor, that was a point of harassment and mistreatment. And then when women get onto the site, the men on site see it as an opportunity to get something from the women, to hit on them, to harass them. And to them, it's all play, it's all fun and games. And then on top of that, PPE, scaffolding, the actual structures needed to work safely and to protect the women's bodies as they work. It's just so many levels. And what I love is we've launched a few advocacy campaigns. The first was we got the Office of the President we had this huge conference in 2022. The PS of Affordable Housing attended, and we started to engage the Office of the President on how we can get this shift paid attention to, that women need toilets as a basic. That happened. And then through that, we started to see that our advocacy and the social media campaigns that we hold, where we share women's stories and experiences, are the biggest avenue of change. And not only in educating women themselves on how to be safe, but also pushing for policy, pushing for systems change. And then this year, we've shifted our lens also towards the industry, where we're running a variety of campaigns for property developers, contractors, built environment professionals, to pledge what they are doing to support safety on site for women and for the workers. And so for me, the change is going to come through collective action and through education and through, listening to the stories of women who are working, and then using those stories to give tangible steps to accomplish safety. And I think that's the only way forward, one step at a time.
Well, that's important, especially, even just dealing with the materials women work with, the dyes, the varnishes,
The
all
paint,
those carcinogenic thing, the paints, the what, things that we're not thinking about. Is there childcare facilities for their children on the block? Things that will encourage women to stay the distance.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you about what has surprised you about women in this sector. These women that you have trained. Yes, you said that they have gone on to obtain employment, run their own businesses, and so on. But as a collective of women, what has changed about them? And how are they changing the construction industry?
So first, I think that shift from empowerment to expertise came from women. When we visited after the fifth year, we did a very intensive feedback exercise where we went back to visit alumni on sites to get feedback on where they were now, 4 years in, 3 years in, 2 years in. And the feedback that was almost unanimous was, you need to do more for our leadership. You need to do more for our positioning in the industry. before you trained us, we survived on business. Now that we're trained, we want to thrive on business, you know? And how are you preparing us for that? And at that point, we didn't teach entrepreneurship. We didn't teach them job contracting. We taught them costing and things like that, but we didn't focus on the business. And so that move to expertise on the quality standards, the quality checks, the steps of a process that you must follow to get consistent results over time. All of that came from the women themselves telling us that these are the things needed for you to understand how to build a business in construction. And also, by the way, we don't want to be employees. We want to be contractors. And that just fueled our whole outlook. And so we responded to that by getting more specific on the level of expertise needed. And for me, that's the future of Buildher. Right now, we're running a program where we're taking in alumni to become the next generation of trainers. When we started, we were training the next generation of women in construction. Now they are already becoming the trainers, just 7 years in. So I just learned that there's no limit for women. And if you try to put a cap on what they can achieve, they're going to break through that cap and leave you behind. So to catch up, you better keep up with them. And that's been very surprising.
Okay. Which tells me that being a founder of a non-profit in this sector that is dealing with training and empowerment is pretty tough. I mean, it seems to me that you have to be a decision maker. You're solving problems all the time. You have to be innovator number one. You need to manage resources. It's a place of continuous expending of energy and courage and fear combined. I mean, you also have to have passion, this never-ending supply of passion and energy, because it's not just money, it's changing lives fundamentally. What toll does that take on you as a human being? What is the cost of leadership at that level of intensity? At that level of passion?
Nobody ever can paint the picture of what it would cost you to be a leader of such a groundbreaking, innovative program. And I think the cost is extremely high. But the lesson I've been having, because now this is my 10th year of leadership, still very young when I compare myself to you. But now in my 10th year, it's what's coming up most for me is not just the cost, but the huge responsibility you have to be wise and to be balanced in the way you approach your personal life and your professional life and your ambition and your targets. Because what it costs you is everything. You don't go home and switch off. You don't go meet your friends and an email comes in and you're able to say, I'll deal with that later. Everything is like crisis mode half the time. And when you think you've hit a stride and you figured it out, oh, here comes a challenge, or here comes an impact result that isn't what you expected. So the cost of staying agile, the cost of staying flexible, of embracing uncertainty, that's actually been the hardest for me. Is certainty is actually a negative environment for innovation. That has been high. It's impacted my family relationships, my personal relationships. It's just been, I'm just such a different person than who I was 10 years ago. But then as I grow and I especially talking to women who've been in leadership more, you understand that half your battle is how you manage yourself, the boundaries that you put around yourself, people always ask, how can you have work-life balance? I don't believe that's possible for me, at least not with my ambition and what I'm doing with my life. I look for harmony. If I have given so much time to this area, that other area is really struggling. So now I need to focus on that area. So I think shifting to harmony is also a way to navigate that. But it's not easy, and we shouldn't pretend it is, and we shouldn't talk about it like it's going to be anything else, like, heartbreaking, but also rewarding, devastating, but also inspiring. You're going to see parts of you that you never thought were possible. And it's a difficult process.
You've written something, and I'm sorry I keep reading these things back to you because I find them inspiring myself. So you'll have to excuse me. You said this about leadership. For me, leadership isn't a title. It's a recurring decision, a responsibility journey, a commitment to stay with discomfort, to hold vision and execution in the same breath, and to follow through with discernment when you don't want to. So, does that mean that leadership is passion and trial combined?
Completely. Absolutely. Unequivocally. Yes, it's passion, but then it's also the humble experience of discovering how wrong you are, consistently, and then discovering that being wrong is still on the right track. And I think those two, for me, pain and passion go hand in hand. And when you try to avoid the pain part of passion, then you don't get as far as you could. And a lot of the time, the pain that you encounter is usually because you're fighting against the learning, or you're fighting against the stretch. Because that's the other thing about leadership, is you're going to be continuously stretched. It's always at that edge, and you keep thinking, okay, when do I get to be just the expert who knows? No, leadership is an edge. It's just what it is.
So, there's a way in which you can mitigate against that tension, that feeling of almost reaching breaking point when you share the load, when you delegate. Are you a good delegator?
I think most of the time, yes, because my architecture is really a personal, creative process. So everybody has to be in front of the thing to get the thing right. So it doesn't work when you tell a designer what to do. It will never be a good design. They have to figure it out. So I come with that understanding that each innovator, each team member, they have to be standing in front of the program, in front of the activity to get it right. So I really enjoy allowing people that process, growing that process and coaching them as they go along. I think where I struggle with delegation is in the early stages of an innovative process. When you're rethinking, redesigning, reintroducing, at that point, I'm pretty much hands on, breathing and living the thing. And I'm just there with it continuously, even if there are people supporting me. And that's a part I'm trying to have a bit more ease about. Um,
Okay. So is that you consider that to be a weakness of yours?
well, my greatest weakness is impatience. I am not a patient person.
Okay. Why are you impatient? What are you impatient? Why do you feel that
Yeah.
um that impatience is a weakness? It could be your superpower.
It's both, actually, because I'm very analytical. I'm very analytical. I'm very pattern oriented. So I notice patterns, and I can see if this and this happened, therefore a logical reasoning, it could go two or three ways. And then through the analytics, I'm always 10 steps ahead of a thing. And then you turn around and your team is not often at that level. You're talking about something that could happen in 10 years, and they're just catching up with today. So the impatience is a disadvantage when I have to constantly remind myself that this is collective action. If you see the direction and the group doesn't see it, there's nowhere you're going. So I have to keep bringing myself back, and that can be painful. And I think the strength, of course, is that because I'm impatient, I don't have to follow these steps that you're telling me are necessary. I'm always willing to learn from experience how far I can go. Because I think when you're creating, the results tell you faster, slower. So all you have to be is pay attention to what the results are telling you. So that impatience helps. But if you don't come back, because my values are collective action, if I don't come back, I will leave the collective behind.
Okay. Well, it seems that what I understand you to be saying is that there's a way in which impatience breaks community, in the sense that if you go too fast, you don't bring people with you. And if you stay within the community frustrated, you can also break it. So it's like trying to find that balance, and it's not easy. I have just marveled at how you have built yourself through building community. And in many ways, I'm very happy with myself because I think I've proved my hypothesis that as you build others, you built yourself, and you become this extraordinary leader. And this brings me to ask you, what's your next big thing? What are you? Where's your next direction? What new ground do you want to break? With Buildher, and with this idea of communities building for change.
Yes. So my next breakthrough is twofold. I've discovered that my personal journey is just as important as my professional journey. So my big breakthrough is to balance that, to go into the next phase of my leadership without sacrificing myself or my personal passions or my personal relationships or my health. My health has really struggled. So that's the first frontier for me, is being a different grounded leader, one whose environment supports this ambition that I hold. And then for Buildher, what I see is I was so scared of this vision I started to see about 3 years ago. I started to see that Buildher was not about Nairobi. It wasn't about Kenya. It's about Africa. I have gotten calls from different African countries, from Nigeria to Rwanda to South Africa to Malawi, people saying, can you come here and do this with us? And I was always like, no, we need to be careful. But I've also gotten calls from the US and from Eastern Europe. Can you come and do Buildher with us? And I was like, no. That was 3 years ago. But over the last 2 years, that courage and that call, you're being called forward. So are you going to answer this call? I see Buildher expanding fast throughout Kenya and then East Africa and then Africa. I see Buildher growing its footprint. Starting next year, actually, I see the footprint of Buildher growing out. And also taking me, I really love that theme because it is true, building me along with it in that process.
Okay. So as we end, you've dealt with power and leadership for a while now. What's your power mantra?
I would say that I would work towards it. I would say first, it is about you. I think especially as women, we want to sometimes put others forward, but leadership is about you. It's about your grounding and your strength. And then when you look across your community, it's about each one of us together. Collective action, but each of us holding accountability for our power, our magnificence, and our responsibilities. So it's you, and then it's all of us together.
That's very beautiful. And thank you for that wisdom.
Thank you so much.
That was the amazing Tatu Gatere. Thank you for joining us on the Power Panel podcast Echoes. And we look forward to your company on our next episode. This is the Power Panel Podcast. Echoes.